Welcome to ParaTruth. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and United Public Radio Network. My name is Erik.
And I'm Justin.
And today we are continuing our very short series here on Ghost Hunting 101. This is one of those series that we've always loved doing over the years. We redo them in various ways. But, last week we discussed some of the basics, basic equipment in particular, EMF detectors, your digital voice recorders, using your own five senses and sixth sense in some cases, if you should have something like that, to help really... to help you guide you, I guess, through the investigation and where spirits might be, right? Just little reminder, using your eyes, your ears, your nose, just your sense of feeling, your sense of touch. These things help us incredibly well when it comes to finding or locating spirits. But those other things, the EVPs, the EMF detectors, those are a great benefit too. Again, helping us to locate stuff. And that's really what they are. They're just there to help us locate. But the things we're going to talk about today are going to help find solid evidence for those things that we are searching for and maybe finding with those other devices. Of course, aside from the digital voice recorder, which actually does give us some pretty solid evidence on occasion. One thing that I do want to bring up before jumping in, though, is a little something we forgot last week. Is probably, in all honesty, the most important piece of equipment.
That's why I put it in our notes.
And that is, if you're doing an investigation at night, it's the handy dandy, not your notebook, but a flashlight. We'll leave the notebook for Blue's Clues. This is hunting ghosts. But flashlights are super important. They're not only beneficial in helping you see in the dark, but they are great trigger objects as well if you're trying to make contact with spirits. And again, this is our thing when we're talking about talking to spirits. This is something you want to take pretty seriously. You don't want to be lighthearted here, because talking to something beyond our world, that's beyond the veil, could potentially be something very dangerous. And that's why we've talked about opening doors and being careful of what you're getting into. With that said, the flashlight, of course, is a big thing, but a misunderstanding is that ghost hunting can only be done at night, which isn't the case. In fact, there's no statistic whatsoever that says that searching ghosts or doing investigations at night is more benefit than doing them during the day. The activity remains the same regardless. The only thing that changes maybe is the type of equipment that you might be using. It might be a little harder to use infrared during the day because of the bright light source of the sun and the daylight. But, aside from that, you can do either or. We've done both. We've done investigations during the day and at night. And I'll tell you what, ghosts aren't just like, oh, hey, it's nighttime, let's go out there and do our haunting thing. It's not, they don't clock in and clock out. They're there all the time. They're not getting paid for this stuff. But yeah, that's it. Last week was pretty simple, straightforward. Today, we've got much more advanced equipment to talk about, and even some of which we're going to show you. So if you don't have a little drink with you already or something, grab one and kick back and relax. Here we go.
Yeah, and I actually completely forgot about using the flashlight as a trigger tool, because that is something we used to do starting out. You just kind of unscrew wherever the batteries are on the flashlight and just do it enough where a touch will make it blink in and out.
Right.
I'm sure we probably forgot a few other things in there from last week, but so yeah, I've got a couple of things here on my table. Something I wanted to start out with right away, because it's our baby. It was the first like very advanced piece of equipment we've bought as paranormal investigators, and that was a full spectrum camera. It can do IR as well. It just depends on what light you're using to illuminate. Now the one we have here is the Phasm from Ghostbox.
Ghost Stop.
Ghost Stop, that's it. As you can tell, really small. I mean, there are infrared and full spectrum cameras that are much larger, but they're trying to give you something that's not going to be in the way. You can put up on a shelf somewhere and be done. Something that is fascinating to me, and I'll turn it on here just so you guys can kind of see and hear the beautiful music, is that there's a little infrared full spectrum light there. You can see it because of my camera picking it up. And then it's got the little camera on the LCD viewer on the back instead of just a little eyepiece that most cameras have. I love this thing because it's just something we had not ever had before. I'm going to play a couple of clips here of it using it as just a regular camera and then using it in full spectrum mode. So we're going to go to this clip here. And that's no lights on, nothing. As you can tell, I'm just breathing. I'm shocked I didn't catch an EVP while I was doing it. And then this is with the full spectrum light on in full dark. And I did the full pan in the dark just out of habit, really. But you can really see the difference that even using IR, because IR is basically night vision, right?
Yeah, more or less. That's exactly what it is. It allows you to see in the infrared spectrum. And as you saw on the camera, I mean, those of you who've worked with IR before, you probably already know this, but the light itself isn't very bright by any means. And yet you could see in that video when the light was on just how much range it actually has in terms of picking up things in Justin's surroundings. So IR is definitely very helpful because, again, we talked about this last week, how the corner of our eyes, the cones allow us to, I think it was cones or rods.
Rods.
Yeah. They have the ability to see in infrared, which is why we
remember what I sent you.
Yeah,
it says sense, not see. I don't know what that means.
No, yeah. If anyone knows the difference between sensing infrared and seeing infrared, please let us know, because that makes no sense whatsoever. They say we can sense infrared, we cannot see infrared. Okay. With that said, we tend to cut shadows out the corner of our eyes very often. A lot of us do. And these are shadows we probably wouldn't see if we were looking directly at them. And the idea is that we are sensing that infrared structure, I guess, and it's being processed through our minds, and we're able to see that stuff. Well, the same thing is happening on this camera. It's allowing us to see in a much broader spectrum with the naked eye rather than just the corner of the eyes. So the idea, of course, that you're able to typically pick up shadows more than anything that are crossing past the viewfinder. But there could be light anomalies that we may not see with our own eyes, mists and various things like that.
Like that orb you talked about, you saw with your own eyes, but you didn't pick up on a camera.
Right. And and that's something that just comes down to different spectrums. If there's something on a spectrum in which we can see with our own eyes, infrared may not be able to pick it up. But as it shifts into the infrared spectrum, we tend to lose sight of it, but these infrared cameras can pick up on it. It's really fascinating, actually, when you think about it, because light kind of works very similar to what I would think scientifically or theoretically as the whole paranormal phenomena of ghosts happens, right? Because they're on, in a way, a different spectrum that we typically can't see with the naked eye. So we have to use these equipments that are capable of crossing the spectrum and working
Yeah.
in both worlds in order for some sort of communication or to figure out there's something there. So yeah, super cool. We really like that. And despite its size, you really could see quite well with the LCD screen. It's bright. It's pretty good size. I had no trouble. Obviously, it's much better when you have it on your computer and you're able to see the whole big screen. But in the moment, we were able to catch things with no problem using that device.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about this in building a team, but absolutely make sure you're going over evidence on a much bigger screen and debunking. I can't push that enough as we talk about this stuff because we'll get into that. Never mind. We'll get into that later about building a team. Something that we have not bought, and they're very expensive, but they are kind of cool to work with, is thermal cameras. Now, thermal cameras, if you don't know what they are, will pick up different heat signatures depending on the heat that is being emanated. So if you point it at a wall, it's kind of going to be like this light to dark blue depending on the temperature in the room, compared to when you shine it on somebody, and then it's going to be a yellowish red hue coming off of a person's body because it's picking up the hotter signatures. And the point to those is a lot of people say that if a ghost is manifesting itself, there's going to be a thermal difference. So if you see this kind of light blue form move in the thermal camera, very possibly a spirit. Erik and I had the opportunity to witness this piece of equipment by working with another team because they had all the great toys. They were a bigger team.
Everything you could ever dream of, they had. It was magnificent and made us a little jealous. But
except for the newer pieces of equipment that have come out since then.
Right.
But and I think you can kind of confess to this. I don't remember us getting any evidence on the thermal camera.
No, there was no evidence on the thermal camera. I think more than anything, everyone was just having fun taking group photos with the thermal camera.
Yeah, or looking, people,
more than anything. But yeah, no, we didn't use, or we didn't find anything on that thermal camera. I think we had better evidence with IR, which we used in a little back room, which I think we might have shared on a story at the beginning of ParaTruth Reborn at some point back in October. But thank goodness that equipment has come a long way, because back then, that was like 2007, 2008, something like that.
I think 2008 is when we started everything. So yeah.
So, in equipment back in 2008, though still great. Unfortunately, wasn't
actually, I take that back. It was 2009 we did that investigation with them, because it was the end of 2008 when we started the podcast and the team.
But yeah, we used the infrared camera, and we thought we saw something that looked just like a Grim Reaper of sorts, and we were convinced that's what it was. And the clients happened to see it, and they were convinced. Friends that were with us were convinced, and that's what we thought it was, some sort of Grim Reaper looking ghost. And it took probably 3 years. And when I think
it was longer than that. I think it was close to when we were getting close to doing ParaTruth is when you came out and was like, hey, you remember that picture?
So 2014. Yeah. So 2000, you consider 2009. Everybody was in agreement. This was some Reaper looking thing. We didn't know what it was. It was some sort of spirit. Fast forward to 2014, I get a new computer. And of course, it's an iMac, and it's much more capable in not only showing a clearer image, but you can do all the edits to clean it up and stuff. And folks, our Grim Reaper was nothing more than a bush. And if we were still in contact with that client, I probably would have, I don't know, I would have been embarrassed to reach out, but we all saw it. We all, it wasn't just us, if it was just us, we're just idiots,
Right.
But it was confirmed by multiple people, ourselves, the clients, and even other team members. And wouldn't you know, technology many years later proved otherwise.
Well, and I do you usually use like Photoshop and stuff to check color
Yeah, yeah.
differentials
I
and
mean, it
shadows and
depends
all that.
on. Yeah, it depends, but usually Photoshop or some sort of version of like something like Photoshop on on my phone, iPhone or something. But
Okay.
yeah, usually I shift the shadows or I change the colors. I'll do black and white negatives. Basically, I do negative images on them because it helps to create the depth better, shadow, light, and darks, which helps to really bring the image forward. I did that actually relatively recently. There were some Dogman photos released on one of our friends' podcasts, Cat Ward. You guys might listen. I'm sure you might tune into her on Tuesdays, I believe.
Mhm.
There were some Dogman photos posted, and I used those photos. I just screenshot them on my phone and did some stuff and sent them back to her to really enhance the images because they were really quite blurry on the thing. But I cleared them up, and it was just phenomenal, the detail of this creature that very much did look what you would think a dog man or some sort of wolf-like creature on its hind legs standing up would look like. So yeah, I mean, technology is freaking awesome today, and AI, of course, is a big help as well. It'll help clear things up.
Yeah, AI.
Yeah, I know that's a whole other thing. I know.
I have this very odd feeling we're going to be doing an AI episode very soon with
I
the
wouldn't
way
doubt it.
technology is ramping up. Something else that is very fascinating to me, and again, we've never used this. We've not had the money to get the technology just because a lot of these things are rather expensive, is a laser grid. And what that basically does is creates a laser grid on the wall. And again, it's supposed to kind of show you where there's movement or a shadow of
Mm.
some kind. Um, and again, through all of this equipment, make sure you're debunking. So if you see something on a video that you're using and you see something go by, make sure you're checking with all your teammates. Hey, was this you? Was there wind blowing in the window that day? Were windows open? Stuff like that. Um, Something again we haven't used is a REM pod.
Mm.
Um, you might know more about that technology than me. I'm not really. I know it has to do with EMF, but
Yeah, well, I mean, worm pods are very much like your EMF detectors. Basically, you would just place them in a spot, whether the floor, table, chair, whatever. And then as you move close to them, it could be just a person, it could be like your hand, it could be a piece of equipment, anything like that. As you get close to it, it'll basically start lighting up, and in many cases, will make a noise. I believe a lot of REM pods you can switch noises and lights on and off, so you can have just noise, you can have just lights, you can have both. But these devices are basically used as an extension, obviously, of the rest of your equipment in ways of making contact, looking for specifically intelligent life in the afterlife. So, we have this idea of residual hauntings in which there's an entity within a house or a location that doesn't like it doesn't have a mentality to do things. It just does them. It's like a natural way. It's like a repetitive motion. In fact, some people think that's not even a true haunting, and instead is just an energy force that is stuck there in a time loop. Many people will go to places in the Wild West and do investigations, and they'll hear a gunshot at the same time every night. And it's the idea because, like we all know, guns, bullets, they don't have a spirit. They cannot exist as a spiritual item on the other side of life. But the energy it creates could expand both space and time, and therefore its energy become frozen and those sounds become frozen. And in those cases, in those types of settings, you can use these REM pods. Like, say you hear you hear a story about someone pacing, they're hearing footsteps pace up and down the hallway at night. You can place these REM pods up and down the hallway, and you can sit there and either use your IR cameras or just your, watch with your eyes and see if these things light up over the course of the night and how they light up. Are they lighting up all at once? Are they lighting up individually one by one as if somebody's slowly walking past them? These are good ways to use REM pods. You can also use them for intelligent hauntings too, where like you can say you're interacting with something and you want to ask them a question and you want them to answer using, the lights on the device for yes, make the sled up 1 time. For no, make the sled up 2 times. And we see that a lot within investigations, that people use the REM pods for that type of communication. Because again, this is not unlike talking to your pets in many ways. Your pet and you guys can communicate to each other and you can understand each other, but you can't always like speak to each other. Like I can tell my pet, "Hey, do you want food?" They know what they're asking, what I'm asking them, right? Or if they're like, "Hey, I need to go outside," they're asking you to go outside, and you have these little visual cues that you use to communicate with them. Because outside of those visual cues, we wouldn't know what our pets are saying to us. Same thing here with the afterlife. In many cases, if you're not getting responses on your EVPs devices, then you might be using these visual cues like lights and sounds in order to interact. And we see that a lot with children, especially supposed hauntings of children, which is a whole nother thing. I can't say that I believe that children can actually haunt, because I do believe that a child, when they die, they are immediately pulled into heaven. That's my belief. Therefore, any child that is here on earth isn't actually a child, but something much more sinister, just trying to pull people into its energy and do whatever it's trying to do. But regardless, we see this a lot where people use REM pods or toys that have REM pods built into them, and they'll try to interact with children by having them play with this toy, and you get a lot of really crazy results. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward device. It's probably one of the most simple ones to use as well in the investigation.
And I do have to say, if you get children giggling or saying weird things, that obviously, of course, is not a child. And we talked about this with our guests from It's Coming. I'm having a hard time remembering their names, so that's why I mentioned the film. But she was having that same situation where she was hearing children or getting responses and EVPs from children. It's like,
right.
Yeah. I think from the very beginning, we were always like, if it's something that's acting like a kid, I don't know what it is, because we've learned that demonic entities or malevolent entities, we'll call them that, will use that as a ploy to get closer to you.
Right.
So something else that we had mentioned this last week, if you're using a cell phone, something that you have on your phone is a camera, a video camera, a regular camera. We always have at least 1 or 2 regular handheld cameras with us at all times. We'll even post them in certain areas. Depending on what we're doing, we might have just a small light in there or something like that, because when you're doing an investigation, especially if you have a very small team, like Erik and I just have each other.
Now we do.
Well, now, yeah.
Which is a whole nother sad story.
You're going to want to be posting video cameras in multiple locations. Even if you do have a big team, you should be doing that, because you're not going to be having people in every room, especially if it's a bigger place, whether it's a business, whether it's a house, whatever it is. And a lot of times you can get the settings on a regular video camera to pick up at least infrared lights if you have infrared lights available. Otherwise, just a flashlight to catch any movement whatsoever, in my personal opinion, is a good idea.
Right.
Something that actually I just picked up as I was starting to collect some new equipment for doing paranormal investigations is a laser thermometer. Looks like this guy right here. And I'm going to shoot it behind me just so you can, maybe you can't see the light. Kind of. It just shoots a infrared light and it'll give you a temperature. Relatively inexpensive, maybe $20-$30. I think I got this one off of Temu for $10. But something to keep in mind to be picking up temperature variance. obviously, like we talked about last week, you can use your personal senses to pick that up, because it's one of those things that you've already got a thermometer built into yourself, but unless you have documentation of some kind with a piece of equipment, scientific method can be limited if you're using just your five senses.
Right.
I don't know if I have batteries in this, but this is just a regular thermostat. I think I picked it up on Temu for a couple bucks. You can find them on Amazon for relatively inexpensive as well. But having those things where you're going to be, I see a tail or a body in front of.
Yeah, that's sorry, Binks. He literally just woke up. He was sleeping down here, and all I heard was like the meow. I was like, oh no, he's awake. The beast has risen.
Or seeing shadow people come across your video.
Right. Look at this though. Look at my video. Like I'm no longer bright white.
Right.
He made
His
it warm.
black tail made
he
it.
changed the white what they call it, the white balance on my camera.
We talked about this last week, and Erik can attest to the multiple phone apps he's used. I've started using Ghost Tube a little bit more than I have in the past. I have several apps, but Ghost Tube is a really good app, whether you get the free version or the paid version. But they've got 4 different apps, which is just Ghost Tube, which I believe is an actual let me look just to double check here. Yeah. Normal voice. Go next. And this acts as a ovilus, as you can tell. If you don't know what an ovilus is, it's basically a piece of equipment that has a word dictionary kind of built into it, or glossary, and it'll just say random words. And the best way to determine if you're getting intelligent responses is if it's an answer to one of your questions. If you're just getting random words, maybe it's just the app. And even the ovilus the piece of equipment that is kind of based off of, it's supposed to detect EMF fluctuations, which chooses a word in the glossary. There's also the Ghost Tube Vox, which is kind of like a spirit box, which we'll go over in a little bit here. There's the Ghost Tube SLS. If you don't know what SLS is, if you've ever used the Xbox Kinect, it's that technology where it's picking up a grid of the human body, and if there's nobody standing in front of you, it's supposed to possibly detect ghost bodies. And their newest one, which I don't know if you've seen this one yet, Erik, is Ghost Tube Seer.
I've heard of it. I've not messed with it, but I've seen it.
It's actually kind of interesting. It creates a little box, basically kind of full of static. And the idea is to have the spirit create an image, again, using EMF, whether it's to a question, if it's you're trying to get an idea where they're from or whatever. It creates this image, and I'll bring up some images that I have from it here. Oh, it's a full that's the video. Never mind. But it'll create an image for you. And I have downloaded a couple. It's kind of interesting. But again, apps versus pieces of equipment. Can you rely on them?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, apps are really convenient because they're right there.
Right.
Everything you need is right there on your phone with you. But yeah, you really don't know for sure whether or not it's accurate, especially when you're using things that utilize EMF detection, because the phone itself gives off EMF, and the phone can't just turn that off. I mean, you can try to restrain it by like turning on airplane mode, but aside from that, you're still going to have EMF problems. And the thing is, like on top of that, our phones are constantly getting frequencies from everywhere.
Mhm.
So there are radio waves constantly hitting your phone. If you have another app open, if you have your internet open, things like that, there are voices that can pop up because they're being carried on in the radio waves that our phones are interacting with. So those are some things that I think you need to consider. And if you're going to use these live in investigation, first and foremost, let me say I don't think you should ever use them live in investigation. Like, or, let me rephrase that. You shouldn't use them as um, hard evidence in an investigation. I think you can use them as a tool to help you find evidence, and then use your other tools to really capture them. But if you happen to use a phone for hard evidence, I would spend a lot of time working with those apps and seeing how finicky they are, how they tend to work,
Mhm.
and make sure you have confidence in them before you go into an investigation. Now, if you're doing this kind of thing for fun and you're just kind of testing the waters, you're walking through cemetery, I think the phone is a great option. I think save yourself some money. You've already got everything you need right there. The tools, they can help guide you. It's fun more than anything. And I will admit that I think a lot of these apps are really meant to be games more than anything. But again, that's just something to consider. I wouldn't rely on these things.
Well, they're also in their descriptions. It always says for entertainment purposes only,
Right.
because they cannot guarantee what you're getting is actual spirit communication. Something that I'm going to bring up now, I forgot to pull it out of my box of tools, is the spirit box. You can create what's called a portal with a external speaker. You hook it up to your spirit box with some reverb and alter some type of other altering pedal to get a little bit of static noise or eliminate the static noise rather, so you don't hear the static noise, but they can still use the white noise to communicate. Erik and I have debated this back and forth whether evidence from a spirit box should be used. The one thing that I will absolutely say is if you are getting intelligent conversation and it sounds like the voice of the person, if you're talking to somebody anyways, then it's very possible it's communication from the other side. Something that I will bring up, and I think I've mentioned this to you, is the day of my father-in-law's funeral. I was downstairs going to the bathroom. My wife Shelly was talking to the spirit box. I had it running, and she asked, "Can you guess what Justin's doing right now?" And as clear as day, I even heard it because that's how loud it was. It said he's taking a poop. And it sounded exactly like my father-in-law. Now, how that could come over radio waves, no idea. The other instance that happened was we were at my wife's place of business, and we were just randomly talking with the spirit box, and the person came on and said a name of a friend of ours that passed away not too long after my father-in-law died. Sounded almost exactly like him, and I believe he had told us to tell his wife that it's okay. He's okay. And that's where you're going to have to come together as a team as we go into the next part of this, whether you release that information or not. You got to go over this evidence. Is it intelligent conversation? Does it sound like the person that you're trying to communicate with if you're talking to somebody specific? There will be times that if you're doing the spirit box and you do release that evidence and it's intelligent conversation, the client's going to be like, oh my God, that's my Uncle Steve. I haven't talked to him since before he died. But that's something you have to go together as a team to kind of discuss.
Right.
Now, building a team. Erik and I will talk about our experiences building a team and really what we feel you should be doing. I think pretty much everybody we had added to our team outside of ourselves, we had done an interview with, right?
Yep. Usually at a Starbucks.
That's right.
It's a good place to do interviews.
Now, as our team started to get bigger, which wasn't very large, we had a total of, I believe, 5 people at one point. We also kind of included our other team members in, not on the interview, but to go over, hey, look, this is what this person says.
Right.
What do you guys think? Now, you don't have to do that. It can just be the founder or the co-founder, or if you have like a manager of some kind, you can make sure you include them in on it. Something that Erik and I had started when we first started a team is create a questionnaire for potential team members, and that's what you're going to use for your interview questions, basically.
Right.
I don't even. Do you remember any of our questions?
I mean, we obviously name, phone number, in some cases address if they were willing. That's something we always left up to them, the address thing. And then it also, if they're open to it, any medical diagnosis that could affect potentially, either affect the investigation or for their own personal safety, like anything we needed to know, asthma, stuff like that, just so we were aware. And then if they're on any types of drugs, like medications, because again, this is something that Justin and I would do to just kind of rule out the possibility of someone having hallucinations while doing investigations with us, because that could be a problem. And then also their personal beliefs, their faith, if they were open to sharing that as well. That never affected anything. That was just our own personal interests. Right. So we knew where they were coming from. We worked, our team specifically was one that was very eclectic in its belief systems. So for some people, that's great. Others, not so much. We like people with different outlooks on both life and death because it helped to bring in a new way of investigating. But yeah, so those are our main things that we would have on this sheet of paper that we would give them to fill out.
All right, yeah, and it was kind of similar to the questionnaire that we would do for clients as well, but we'll kind of go over that after we talk about building your team. Something that I wish we could have done much more when we started, it's a little bit easier now, is to do a background check if you're able to. There are some sites out there that'll give you a free trial, or you can do one for free or something like that. Definitely make sure you do a background check. You want to know who you're inviting into your team, especially if your team is getting large and you're starting to lose track of how many people there are and who they are and stuff like that.
I know we've worked with a couple of teams who are so large that they would have to cycle out their investigators per investigation,
depending on how many investigations they had scheduled. Right. Something Erik had brought up, and I think we did implement this as well, is just like an employer, make sure that you do a probationary period for new members. I think we did 30 days.
Yeah, we did 30 days. And this isn't like a hard thing. This is just something to consider. We did it because the one thing that we wanted was for our team to mesh, to get along.
Mhm.
We didn't want just people to come in, work individually in a group setting, but then that's it. Like, we wanted to build a team that was going to interact with each other both in the investigation, during the investigation, but also outside of it, almost like creating friends. Um, you know, I guess very much like creating friends, but, but we would do this 30-day probationary period because on occasion you might have someone come along who just doesn't get along with other people. There could be arguments. There could be some, we actually ended up eventually falling into something like that, a situation with somebody who just was a good guy overall, but he had his own ideas of what he wanted to do on our team without permission. And that kind of, that's a big thing of butting heads with both us, but also with other investigators on our team, because then it starts to brand you as a paranormal team.
Right.
So that's something you want to be careful of. But again, that's just a consideration. That's something that we do or have done personally. And I think it's a great idea. Just make sure you let them know ahead of time, like, hey, here's a 30-day probationary period. After those 30 days, you can do whatever. You can sit down and have an interview, and you could be like, hey, we're gonna have a party. You're welcome. Initiate you in blood and all that stuff, right? But
I don't recommend that.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, and on top of that, that same particular person, we had a guest investigator with us for one of our investigations.
Yeah.
And he was doing stuff that we had never told him was okay to do during an investigation, mainly showing evidence before it's been gone over.
Well, and that's something that I think is also very important. And that's actually, you'll see it later. We have a little list of rules that we also wanted to share with you guys. But yeah, that's something that you want to be careful of. Like, sharing evidence too soon could potentially discredit the case entirely, the investigation, because if one individual who sees their pictures says, hey, look at this, but then we as a team look at it and say, oh no, what you call is this, it's debunked. Well, now you have to go back and tell them why this person was wrong, which could be a bad thing, because unfortunately not unfortunately, but there are a lot of people out there, a lot of clients who want the paranormal stuff to be real in their place, right? So if they're seeing this and they think, oh, cool, we got ghosts. And then you come back like, sorry, no, this was high shutter speed with a little bit of movement in the camera, which made a lot of lights look like something was passing by, but really it was just movement blur, which was the case in this case, by the way. Well, now you don't have a haunting. You just have someone who manipulated a photo, whether purposely or accidentally, doesn't matter. We were told that he messed with the settings, believing
by
him,
he admitted
it, as a way to I don't know, I guess somehow detect ghosts better with photos. No, just no. It was a big mess, and it's really something that triggered a lot of other things he started doing not long after that. But yeah, that's why we do the 30-day probation. That's why we're very careful, and we want to create rules, which is the next thing we want to talk about here. And that is, if you are a co-founder or a founder of a team, then you should consider establishing certain rules for your team as a whole, but also for your members. Now, again, as a founder of a team, you have full control of what is and what isn't on your team, right? At least you should. And of course, if you have a co-founder, 2-3 people, sit down with them, write up some rules. Like, what are things that you are okay with? What are some things you will not be okay with when it comes to your team, whether how they interact with each other or with other with clients or other teams around the area. That's something we've walked into a lot, was us working with 2 or 3 other teams on some cases. When we did the Jeffrey Dahmer house over in Bath, Ohio, there were 3 different teams there for that. It was us, our friends, which are like 6, I think, or 7 people. And then there was a smaller group there with us as well. It was the first time anyone was allowed into this house to do an investigation. So we kind of, we were invited along, but they brought all these people to get as much as possible, right?
Yep.
But yeah, we all got along really well, which is great, but that's not always the case. So you want to make sure you do place some rules down just for the safety, if nothing more, of you and your crew, but also just for your credibility as well as a team and an individual.
Yeah. I think we only put a couple on our notes, but I think the first thing we really should point out is rule number one is being safe.
Yes. Yes.
Being aware of your surroundings. Make sure you're having a flashlight on you at all times, especially if you're doing investigations in the dark. No horsing around. I think that's common sense, but many people have to be given rules so that they're not breaking them.
Yeah. Or they need to be given rules to break. I don't know. But with that said, when it comes to safety, like, remember that some things are out of your control. So always be on your guard, always be aware of your surroundings. Going back to the Jeffrey Dahmer house in Bath, Ohio, we were walking around the backyard. It was right around dusk, I believe. So prior to the actual investigation indoors. But we were walking around, we were kind of being just introduced to the scenery. We kind of just saying this is where he buried all the bags of Stephen Hicks after he hacked them up and stuff, right?
Right.
Or this is where this happened. This is where well, we're taking this little trail because it's a pretty decent sized backyard, a ton of trees. And I turn around, I take the trail around this one tree, and I was really close to this tree. And just at the last moment, I happened to notice a nail sticking out of the tree at the same height as my left eye. And I like shifted to the side really quick. I was like, whoa, that, like, if I hit that, that would have hopefully did nothing more than hurt a little bit, but you never know. That's a nail sticking in a tree, right? So that's something you want to be careful. Like, be aware of your surroundings. Cool thing though about that nail, which is why I'm glad that happy almost accident happened. When Jeffrey Dahmer was a kid, he would actually capture squirrels and frogs, which, by the way, this is not the cool part. He would pin them on trees with nails while they were still alive.
That's stray cats too.
Stray cats, like all that stuff is disgusting. It's yeah.
Yeah.
However, what was cool, or in this case, interesting, is that this nail, when we did the math on it, would have been based on the age of, or basically where the nail was and the age of the tree, would have been a nail that he used himself to pin an animal up when he was like 6 years old or something at the time. That tree would have grown.
It went all the way into his teens, I think.
Yeah, that tree would have grown over those years, and the nail, or the level of the nail would have been right where it was. So, finding that was like, this is a nail that Dahmer himself likely put in this tree doing something very horrible to some poor creature. So that in of itself is kind of cool. Just the idea that this was here. And we did do a little bit of an investigation. I will say, as a collector of haunted items, I do wish I had that little nail in my collection, but I wasn't collecting things at the time. So,
well, you were, I think at that point, very new to your faith again, so you were very weary about doing things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think we had been told about it, but I don't think that the owner had told us that there were still nails in the tree. He might have, but we were so spread out at the very beginning, just listening to him and in awe where we were, because just knowing what happened there in and of itself is creepy enough.
Right.
So I definitely feel that make sure you're getting that full history should be another rule. The full history of the property, or as much as the current owners know, as my hellhounds are waking up and getting active now. Okay, hang on. Enough. Anyways, something that is, I put this rule down just because we mentioned it earlier, is prioritize your investigations. Something that we mentioned last week is, if there's a child involved, or if you have somebody that feels they're being oppressed or possessed by demonic influence, you really should prioritize those other investigations. Of course, accept as many investigations as you feel you need to, but if you schedule an investigation and then another one comes up where there's a child involved, and this is just me personally, I think Erik probably agrees with me, you should prioritize that over the other investigation. Be like, hey, look, this is what's going on. Can we push your investigation to the next day or the week after, or whatever the case may be?
Right. 100%. Yeah, actually, I don't have anything to add to that. So another rule, though, that I do think is important here, and this is the one that I had just covered a little bit here regarding evidence, and that is to establish a rule in which all evidence to be reviewed prior to sharing with the client, either by the team itself or by a selected individual who specializes in or whose sole purpose on the team is to go over evidence. This way you can help limit false information and solidify your credibility as an investigator. Again, as that story was earlier, when you have someone who takes a photo and immediately runs to the client and shares it without allowing the rest of us to take a look first and help clarify whether or not it truly is paranormal, that could be a little deceiving, because then the client feels like they're either being lied to by one of the two parties, or they're just simply confused. So it's definitely very important, I think, to make sure that any evidence collected is held on to until 2 or 3 days later, after all the evidence has had time to be reviewed, notes taken, video clips saved, that you can then take back to your client, should there be any. This way, again, it's for the safety and credibility of your own team, but also as you and your team members individually. The last thing you want is somebody to come in forging evidence or accidentally forging evidence and just get a bad rap, because that affects everybody. That also affects them.
Absolutely. I'm trying to remember, was that before or after the Jeffrey Dahmer investigation? It was after, right?
That was after. Yeah, that was out in no, I was going to say Monroe Falls area, but I don't think that one was. I forget where that was. It was a bar. It was a bar.
But that same individual had taken a picture of, there was a mirror in the shot at the Jeffrey Dahmer house. And I don't know what he did to this photo, but when he presented it to us, there was this blue light coming off of the mirror itself, not the frame, but the mirror itself. I want to say there was a couple glints of light in it. And he told us that that mirror was a portal into the house. Now, we can get into a whole conversation about mirrors and them being portals. However, that's when we discovered that he had changed all of his settings on his camera to pick up a less shutter speed, as Erik had mentioned. And not that can't do things for you, but it can also create false evidence that's not even there.
Yeah. Well, so one thing you guys might know a lot about night mode on iPhones and Androids. In this case, it basically leaves the shutter. It slows it down. It allows the shutter to stay open at a longer period of time. Now, because a shutter is maybe creating a 3-second exposure, it gives that photo and everything in it 3 seconds of light, extra light, before it snaps. Which means if anything in that photo moves, or in that image moves within those 3 seconds, it's going to create a motion blur. And I see that a lot on a lot of photos taken at dusk or early in the morning or in low light situations. People say, oh, this is a ghost, but it's not. It's an actual person walking past your lens, your camera lens, and it creates a ghosting effect. Well, the same thing was happening here. So usually when you do this type of thing, one, you want to make sure your surroundings are still. There's no moving around and stuff, right? But also, you don't want to be holding your camera in most cases. You want it on a tripod where it can be still. You hit the button, you walk away, let it go so that there's no movement. Because if you were to bump the camera just slightly, have a little bit of movement, then it's going to create all these little blurs and movements as if there's something either walking by or it's going to catch a reflection, like in this case, the mirror. There were a lot of people at this investigation investigating outside while others were investigating inside. There were flashlights constantly being pushed, like poked inside the windows accidentally. We can't confirm nor deny that this was a flashlight, the light of a flashlight being caught on this mirror. But there was no proof otherwise either. So we can't sit here and say, oh, this is paranormal, because we know throughout the rest of the night, there's been a lot of flashlights being poked into this place. So, again, there's, and some of these people are using flashes on, like, during the investigation as well, which is fine. You can use a flash on your camera to take photos. But when that happens, of course, you're naturally going to get a glare on windows and mirrors and things like that.
Right.
So just something to be aware of, be cautious of. If you do have a slower shutter speed or something like that, you want it to be still. You don't want to move it. You don't want anything in your subject walking. Ideally, if someone's in it, make sure they're sitting or standing still, and know who's in frame, because that way, if there is a ghosting and you notice, oh, I had 2 people here during the photo, but here's a third thing moving. Well, now you've got something that's interesting. However, you got 2 people sitting there and one of them look like they're moving. That's not some other entity moving past them creating the blur. It's that person creating the blur.
Right.
So,
well, and my point with that is he had presented that to us, and we flat out said we are not presenting this as evidence to the client, because although you had done this to try and get better evidence, to us this looks like I want to say he had put it into some type of software too after he had taken it.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on that. But point being, make sure that you're making it completely aware to your team that no evidence is shared with the client at the time of the investigation, because you can include the client in the investigation. I don't think that that's a problem, but you shouldn't be sharing a bunch of evidence with them. The same situation happened at Jeffrey Dahmer's house. Because we were using a homemade ghost box at the time, I didn't have speakers hooked up to it. I had a recorder and some headphones hooked up to it. We had a person listening to the ghost box, which this is actually a practice now. I don't know if you've heard of this, but blindfolding somebody and have them listening to a spirit box, and make sure it's noise canceling headphones, and have them talking, and then also have an EVP session happening elsewhere to collaborate evidence. But this person was talking what she heard at the time, and she heard something about a journal. And this was a team member on another team, not our team. So we had this client basically harassing the team that invited us about the evidence for this journal that was talked about. And after I reviewed all of the recordings from the ghost box, I didn't hear one thing that said journal in there. But supposedly it said there's a journal in the closet. And I believe it was referencing a journal from Jeffrey Dahmer's house, or when Jeffrey Dahmer was there.
Right.
So definitely make sure you're emphasizing that, even to your clients. Okay, this came up in the spirit box session. Please let us review it before we present it to you, saying that this is what was said.
Right. So with that said, I mean, those are the main big rules that we recommend. There are plenty of other rules that you might want to put into effect yourself. There is no right or wrong answer. It just depends on you and your team and what you want to do with this. Maybe those rules are much more lenient if it's just for fun. But if you want to be serious about investigating, you need to create it like you would a business, right? You need to
Right.
be effective. You need to be um, credible. You need to let people trust you. So creating those rules will help to establish those things for your benefit and the benefit of your team. So the very last thing I think we have here really to discuss here regarding building a team for ghost hunting is, of course, your first initial contact with the client. And it may not be the first initial, might be your second time. Maybe you get a call. That's your first contact.
Right.
But then you want to go in and talk with them. It's very important, at least to us, it was to create a questionnaire for our clients, just like we had for our members. We
Right.
created one for our clients because the biggest thing that that any investigator could have trouble with is being lied to. This is something that doesn't happen that often, thankfully. It
Right.
does happen occasionally. It did happen. I believe it was Ghost Hunters at one point. It happened where a client lied. Ghost Hunters went in. They did a whole TV show. They were finding all these things, and then I think it was like Haas or something who like opened the door to this because he opened the door and heard this woman laughing in a bathroom, and then he went to open it again and it laughed again, and he started noticing that there was a speaker in the ceiling that would trigger a laugh every time the door opened. Then they started digging in. They started looking at the chandeliers, and the chandeliers had electronic or mechanical movements above them, so that when the electronics were pressed, the chandeliers would shake to make it look as if something was shaking them. So they did this whole investigation only to find the whole thing was a joke. And the client just sat there on TV smiling about it the whole time, like, oh well, like that this was the joke to see if you guys should really do it, type of thing. Now, I'm not saying people are going to do that to you, but what you want to do is try to get as much honesty from your client as possible. Again, this is for your own protection, because if someone's saying they just have a ghost that happens to be there, they're witnessing some sort of haunting, they don't know, they're kind of freaked out about it, and that's it. Okay, if that's all that there really is, then you do what you do. However, if what they're leaving out is, well, we we did this little thing and we called upon a demonic entity, and we did this whole ritual, and now there's this thing here, suddenly as an investigator, like, okay, well, I better get my guard up if I'm going to help here, or get someone in who can help with this situation because it's unsafe. Also, I worked with somebody once who was witnessing something, some sort of evil spirit. However, after a couple of weeks of working with her, she confessed that she would, on occasion, hallucinate because of the medication she was on.
I was trying to remember. I remembered this, and I'm like, was this on a show or was this us that did it?
Yeah, it was us. So, and that is something that's, if I had the information in the very beginning, I wouldn't have said, oh, well, no, there's no thing here. That's just you.
Right.
No, you don't do that. But it gives you an understanding of, okay, some of these things that you're witnessing very well may be the medication, but maybe some of these things aren't. So let me go in, do a preliminary investigation, see what I can find. If I find something, then okay, we can go from there. If I don't find something, let's circle back. Let's see, let's have this talk again. What are you going through? What are you witnessing? Things like that. What have you done? Getting to know people's, now I'm not saying you need to know everyone's in and outs here, but if someone has been dabbling in the occult when they were kids, and by occult, of course, I mean something that, in this case, that they don't understand when they're kids playing around. A Ouija board, for me, that was an issue. Some people might try to do like tarot cards. That could be a problem for some people. So I've heard, all kinds of various little things, rituals and stuff that people will do for fun, only to spark something, open a door that then follows them through the rest of their lives. And when you're able to establish those early beginnings, then you can start to hone in your investigation on whatever entity that might be present there. A recent death in the family, that could be important if a haunting just happened to start. Because here's one thing you need to consider. Is it possible there's the spirit of that person who passed away. I don't know. Maybe it depends on your beliefs.
Right.
However, can depression trigger these same things, making you think you're hearing an individual, a loved one, or seeing one? Yes, 100%. The mind is capable of that kind of stuff. I mean, how many times, I can't tell you how many times I heard when my dog died many years ago, but I would hear his bark for weeks after that.
Yeah.
I knew he wasn't there. And it's, I did not believe at all that his ghost was there. But his bark would happen. And that's something that our minds can do. Our minds can trigger these sounds. Like, how many of you have a cell phone and you hear it chime like you just got a text message and you go click on your phone and there's no text message? Like,
I feel it vibrate in my pocket sometimes.
yeah,
And it
like these
doesn't.
are ghost things, not literal ghost things, but these are ghost phenomena that happen in our minds. They make us think, or our bodies make us think or feel things that aren't actually happening. We're just so used to hearing and feeling these things that our body's like, oh, hey, buzz, got to check your phone or ding. But yeah, these are things that you really need to establish, and having the questionnaire for your clients, asking them to be as honest as possible. And if, some clients, they don't want to be honest, that's okay. If they don't want to share the medication they're on, they don't want to share their past, you cannot press, you cannot push. You have a right, of course, to say, well, okay, I'm sorry. If you can't share this, we can't help you. That's up to you as an investigator. However, for us, we were always just straightforward. You want to be personable. You're there to help them as best as you can. And the best way that you can help them is that they help you.
Right. Well, and not just divulging mental illness. I totally get it. I have parts of my personality that I don't want to divulge to, but it's going to give us a better idea of what we're dealing with before we even go into the investigation. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that I think that kind of sums up. There's so much more involved stuff to this, but we wanted to make it very simplified. Anything that we didn't put into our notes that we're forgetting to mention about getting started in the paranormal?
No, I don't think so. Just you do you. If it's for fun, do it for fun. If it's something you want to get into, take your time. Like, don't rush anything.
Right.
Other than that, I think we covered it all.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Oh, God. You know how I feel about those moments.
Do you regret going into paranormal investigation at all?
No, not at all. I love doing that stuff. It was so much fun. And sometimes scary, I'll admit. But it was great. It's always, especially the ones where we were helping individuals, helping people who are just trying to find answers. I think that was probably the most rewarding. But I will say the most fun are probably the ones that we just did for fun. Sometimes you go some places like this place, there's something here, and you just do it. Because the nice thing is, like, when you're doing ones for fun, you don't have any real restraints. You're not worried about the client. You're not worried about shaking things up, in wherever it's at in the location. You're just there to kind of kick back and see what we can find. But yeah, no, I would say I don't have any whatsoever. Like, I would do it. We haven't done any in quite a while. I don't know if we're going to do any, like have a team and all that ever again, but I would definitely do it.
Well, the one thing I will say is I think one of my all-time favorite investigations we did was Gore Orphanage. Even though it was kind of a urban legend, because all the information we could find at the time, and I think even now, there was no orphanage on this plot of land that we were investigating.
Yeah.
But it was just fun. We were in the middle of nature. I believe I had an ex-girlfriend with us at the time. But just doing that, and then if I remember right, we did find handprints on your windows that were kind of fogged over, and that was one of the things that was mentioned in the urban legend.
Right. Yeah.
But the only other thing I'll say is as much as we try to get away from the paranormal, it always tracks us back in, which is why ParaTruth Reborn became a thing.
That is one thing. You're gonna get into this. If you're gonna get into this, like it gets a hold on you. Like I truly think that, like, I think everyone we've ever talked to who's been in this world, they've tried leaving at some point and get dragged back. Like there is something that just latches on and is like, you're staying here. And you know what? I'm for it. Like I enjoy it. I enjoy, and not just the investigation, just everything with the paranormal, everything we talk about, all the investigating, both in terms of ghost hunts, spiritual business, extraterrestrials, all of it. Like time, space and time stuff. Like it's just all so fascinating, and it really expands, I think, the world in a way that a lot of people, maybe, I was about to say unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, that a lot of people don't see. Maybe it's for their best if they've not been put in this world. But for me, like, I know a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine who've never been in this kind of, in the paranormal. They've never done the investigation. They've never witnessed demonic activity, and they are thrilled about it. And I am thankful that they didn't, because I'll tell you what, when I went through the demonic stuff, that was rough. That was definitely some of the roughest stuff I've ever been through in terms of spiritual battles. But I would never wish it away. Like, I'm glad I had those experiences. I'm glad I still occasionally have those experiences, because it just reminds me that there is a God out there who is watching over, who's higher, who's a creator, who's good, and all powerful. And so, like, these are all little things that are just reminders. Like, there's so much more beyond what we can see here on Earth.
Well, and that's my point to bringing that up, is make sure that you're going to be dedicated to this, because it is very hard to walk away from it, especially if you opened yourself up. Whether that's doing the investigations, or if you've started opening yourself up to being a psychic or a psychic medium or anything like that. I mean, I feel there are people out there that are just natural, have those abilities, but there are people that work at it too. But definitely make sure you're dedicated to it before you're just like, yep, we're going to do it. And then you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, guess what? I don't think you really have a choice. You're in the world. You're going to be in the world for the rest of your life. Yeah, we got a lot of great stuff coming up for you guys. We got guests lined up. We got a lot of topics we want to talk about, and we're just starting out in 2025. Never thought I'd see the day that we're in 2025, and I'm still having the hundreds of questions that I have about the paranormal.
And every day it just gets weirder.
It absolutely does. So until next week, folks, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Erik. Peace.